Good morning, everyone. I am Christelle Coleman, and it is my privilege to host you today at the 27th InsureTalk event. We have people joining from all around South Africa, but also international attendees, and it's really fantastic to see the chat going on in the chat box. So welcome to all of you. Before we get onto the business of today, I want you to take your mind back a little bit to 1998. I have a particular point of reference in 1998. It was the year that I did my first startup, the wonderful Thatch Risk Acceptances. And I was reflecting on how different things were in those days. You know, when you started a business then, we didn't, believe it or not, internet was there, but we didn't really use it in business as we do today. Most companies had one email address that they shared, and the biggest thing that you did when you started up a business was to get your telecom lines installed so that you can use your phones and that you can get faxes. And today the world is very, very different. If you wanted to meet someone, then you had to meet them in person. Someone had to introduce you. You had to get a business card and get referred, and then you had to pick up the phone and phone people to make an appointment. And mainframe systems were installed in the office. You know, we had people coming in to put in cables, and it was all very, very physical and very much there in the space that you worked. I went and had a look at what were the top global risks in the late 90s. Again, it was a little bit of a nightmare because it's not like today we just Google top risks and they come up in a little summary for you. I had to go and read the reports. But the risks were mostly centered around political and socio-economic issues and health, which I thought quite interesting, because there was this sheer number of smokers that was just increasing all around the world. And it was flagged regularly as a major health risk. So, as we know, the only constant that we really have in life is change. And today's world looks very, very different from the late 90s. Yet still some things stay the same. People are still smoking. We know smoking is deadly. You have to be either profoundly brave or a little bit stupid to think you're going to dodge that bullet. Young male drivers are still statistically prone to have more severe accidents than their female counterparts. That's still the same. What has changed profoundly, though, is the outlook on global risks. If you were like me around in 1999, you will remember that we literally partied away on New Year's Eve on the end of 1999 because we thought the world was going to end. I have distant memories of pink fairy wings and glitter at a rave at the River Club in Cape Town, and it was called a Y2K rave. And yes, Y2K, that was our very first real risk of cyber. Unfortunately, or fortunately I should say, we all woke up the next morning, unfortunately, with very big hangovers, and the world didn't end. We were still there. Today's cyber risk is listed as one of the top 3 risks by the World Economic Forum, and the top risk, of course, is climate change. So what does smoking, bad driving behavior, and cyber risk have in common? It has human behavior in common, and more specifically, the need to change the way that we do things. Fortunately, today you are in the right place. You're in this virtual conference room with a few thousand other attendees, and you simply have to sit back and listen to the lineup of speakers who will help you understand cyber risk, who will help you understand what to do differently, whether it is about your personal cyber risk exposure, whether it, you know, if you are a small business owner or you're responsible for large corporations. Something will be said today that will be of interest today along all the wonderful talks that we have lined up. So the conference theme today is the current state of cyber threats, emerging trends, and how individuals and SMEs can mitigate against them. Our headline sponsor is Bright, and thank you very much, Bright, for making this event possible. Event sponsors Global Choices. So let me talk a little bit about Bright Insurance. Bright is a premier proactive commercial risk specialist in Southern Africa. Bright Insurance Company's operations in South Africa and Botswana are recent additions to the Fairfax Holdings portfolio. Fairfax is a company based in Toronto, Canada. and through its subsidiaries is engaged in property and casualty insurance and reinsurance and investment management. Bright Insurance Company approaches customer risk with purpose, proactively working with brokers and clients to enable better risk decision. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. Our first speaker is from Bright, and he is head of claims, Christopher Apana. He is Bright Insurance Company Head of Claims and Liability Risks, and he comes with a wealth of experience. Christopher is, like I said, the Head of Claims and Liabilities at Bright Insurance. He's been in the insurance industry for quite a number of years. He's begun his career as a candidate attorney at Legal Aid South Africa before joining SHA Specialist Underwriters as a claims specialist and a team leader. He has worked as a claims manager for Santam Insurance. He holds an LLB from the University of KZN, a Masters of Law cum laude, and from the University of South Africa, and an advanced certificate in management practices, business administration, and management from Henley Business School. Thank you, Christopher, and welcome.
Thank you, Christelle. Thank you for the intro, and good morning, everyone. Today, I'm truly excited to be sharing a topic that's quite dear to my heart. It formed the subject of my LLM research over the past few years, and that is the potential liability of directors for corporate cyber breaches in South Africa. I just want to share my presentation with the plenary. Give me 2 seconds. Perfect. So before I go on, I actually want to share a video with the plenary today that I think may actually provide much context to the discussion today. So here it is.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, the attack started with a classic phishing email. Now, these phishing emails are very convincing. I wouldn't fault anyone for falling for them. Now, the infected laptop was then taken to the IT department.
Yes. I think we have a problem.
While IT was looking at Jimmy's laptop, your PR department started to get flooded with feedback from customers. Social media channels were posting all kinds of content that was irregular and just no one knew why it was happening. It was at that time that your team discovered you were under a cyber attack.
Okay, this is not good.
And that's when we called you guys in.
Now, the first thing we found out is that all the social media passwords were taken from the infected laptop by the hackers.
We need to set up a war room.
So what were they after?
We didn't know it at the time, but we took a look at the laptop memory dump and found out which resources were exposed. Now, when you have an attack like this, you need to collaborate across all teams. We set your PR department to handle media and customer communications. We had IT monitor the hacker's progress on the server. Now, at the same time, we deployed sensors across the domain. We monitored traffic spikes, and we analyzed server and firewall data to see what would happen. Now, soon after that, it was clear that the hackers were after your main grid-controlled network. Now, we needed to stop them and do everything we could before they got there.
Everyone, get ready to shut them out.
Ready.
Blocking all command and control domains, disabling implants.
We're compromised.
Destroy everything.
Now, we're able to freeze all compromised accounts and isolate the hacker's access to a single server.
No access to field operations, but crucial data retrieved. Purging all evidence.
And the damage?
Minimal and contained. Now, we're going to help you set up new passwords for your teams, and we're going to handle all communication about the attack with your shareholders and your customers.
Well, that's great.
The hackers will try again, but next time you'll be ready.
Now, that snippet definitely, to my mind, reflects the reality behind cyber attacks that companies have been enduring for, say, the past 10 years or so as we moved into this interconnected world. And most especially over the last 2 years, where we saw an acceleration of digitalization across various sectors of commerce and business. Now, Mr. Mueller, a former director of the FBI, put it so eloquently when he said there are only 2 types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. And I think that there is no time that that statement has been more relevant than now. Cyber threats have ranked in the top 5 risks to business since 2018, according to Allianz. And over the last 2 years, cyber risks have swept through companies with alarming vigor and sophistication. Now, as a starting point, we must unpack what is meant by a corporate cyber breach. Within the context of this presentation, I use the term to refer to both a cybersecurity breach and a data breach. And believe it or not, those aren't actually synonymous with each other. A cybersecurity breach occurs when a cyber criminal hacks into a company's system by finding a way around the security controls, thus gaining unauthorized access to the computer system with information which is valuable to the company. A cybersecurity breach is preceded by a cyber attack, which may manifest itself as a virus, spyware, malware, phishing, or denial of service attack. Predominantly, though, a cybersecurity breach occurs first and then may lead to a data breach. The Cybercrimes Act of 19 of 2020 defines or provides that unauthorized access to computers, to computer systems and data storage and data is illegal. It provides a definition of cybersecurity breaches, which is worded very widely to include various methods used by cyber hackers to gain access. And if that access is unauthorized, then the person gaining the unauthorized access to the computer system is committing a crime. A data breach, on the other hand, like I said earlier on, is not synonymous with a cybersecurity breach, and vice versa. In the main, data breaches are usually preceded by a cybersecurity breach. And the general definition of a data breach means the unauthorized disclosure of confidential information and is characterized by an unlawful and intentional interception of data. Data breaches also occur in cases where employees either accidentally or negligently cause confidential information to be disclosed. And this can happen if an employee is entrusted with data and are negligent in the way that they transport or store that data. Now, this is what happened in the much publicized Experian breach some months ago. Experian suffered a data breach that exposed the personal information of approximately 24 million South Africans, as well as 800,000 companies. And that was due to a fraudulent data inquiry where employee negligence led to the disclosure of the data. In terms of South African legislation, both the Cybercrimes Act and the POPI Act, as we also lovingly know it, have set down definitions of data breaches and put forward positive obligations on companies to report instances of data breach. Now, for example, Section 22 of the POPI Act places an obligation on companies to notify parties should they suffer a data breach where sensitive information may have been accessed or stolen by an unauthorized individual. Now, let's consider the impact of a corporate cyber breach within the South African context. Now, before we get into the figures that are on your screen, pause for a moment and let's consider that the costs associated with a data breach as a result of a cybersecurity breach can be categorized as direct, indirect, and systemic costs. Now let's frame these costs or these categories of costs against the figures on the screen. Now, according to the Cost of Data Breach report issued in 2020 by the Ponemon Institute, The cost of a data breach for a company in South Africa is approximately 2.1 million US dollars. And this number has obviously grown since 2020. And you don't need me to tell you that an amount like this can seriously cripple a company and may even result in its closure. Direct costs refer to costs that are incurred by a company immediately after a data breach. And these costs relate to the containment, the investigation, as well as the regulatory and legal costs. Now, according to the same cost of data breach report, the average cost or direct cost of a data breach per record is 146 US dollars. And this translates into a notional 3 billion US dollars for the Experian data breach. It's a mind-boggling number from a perspective point of view. Indirect costs refer to the cost of the brand, the share value, the reputation, resources, time, effort spent by the company to contain this data breach. And then you have systemic costs, which refer to the incidental costs associated with the data breach. So, for example, that would include, where a customer's information has been stolen, and that information is used for fraudulent transaction, which then needs to be reversed. And as you can imagine, these categories of costs are quite long tail and can persist long after a company even closes down. One thing is for sure, if a severe corporate cyber breach occurs, then it's likely that a third party may want to hold the company liable. And considering the legislated management duties of directors to the company, the question then arises as to whether the directors may be held liable for damages suffered by the company as a result of a corporate cyber breach. Now, to answer this question, consideration must be given to directors' duties of care, skill, and diligence, and whether on the happening of a corporate cyber breach, that means the directors may be held liable to the company. Now, the potential loss to a company as a result of a corporate cyber breach may prompt the company to pursue a claim for damages against the directors. The liability to the company may be founded in delict if the director's conduct meets the requirements of delict. But before we get there, there's an assessment that must happen. And this assessment involves determining whether the directors have breached their duties of care, skill, and diligence. Now, these duties are usually referred to as the composite duty of care that directors have or owe to a company. The duties have been legislated in terms of Section 76(3)(c) of the Companies Act 71, 2008. And this section simply requires that a director must carry out his or her duties with the same care, skill, and diligence as is reasonably expected of a person who carries out the same duties with the same general knowledge, skill, and experience of that director. And it's a lot to take in. It's an objective, subjective sort of assessment. The strange component, though, is of this composite duty of care is the introduction of diligence. And obviously, our legislature didn't explain what this diligence meant. And so the question begs as to what this extra duty requires of directors. And let's unpack that for a moment. The introduction of diligence to the common law duty of care and skill has been argued to extend the duty, and it should be read as an additional component to the duty of care and skill. Legal authors in South Africa have used the ordinary definition of diligence and are they've mostly concluded that diligence includes attendance at board meetings, attention, supervision, monitoring of the company and the corporate affairs. Some authors have described diligence to connote caution and attention. And this hints at an oversight and monitoring element of the duty of care, skill, and diligence in terms of the Act. From a corporate governance point of view, the King 4 under Principle 1 recommends that directors, amongst other things, exercise oversight and monitoring within the corporate structure. The King 4 further recommends active oversight by directors into the IT governance of the company. Oversight and monitoring appears to be a component of the director's duties, finding its place under diligence. Now, based on this contextual information, one could reasonably conclude that directors therefore need, or therefore do indeed have, a legislated oversight and monitoring responsibility as part of their composite duty of care. Now, to summarize, we can accept that in addition to care and skill, directors must also exercise supervision and monitoring duties in relation to the company and the company's corporate affairs. Directors, though, have a built-in protection in the Companies Act, and that is known as the business judgment rule, which we will consider and assess. And in that assessment, we are assessing whether the business judgment rule will afford directors protection from their failure to discharge their supervision and monitoring duties. Some background, though, is needed on the business judgment rule. Now, the business judgment rule originated in the United States of America and was adopted by South Africa and incorporated into the Act under Section 76(4). The business judgment rule simply creates a rebuttable presumption that a director can rely on to avoid personal liability to the company or its shareholders for a bona fide, though poor, business decision that negatively affects the company. There must be evidence of an informed, deliberate, and good faith process of decision-making undertaken by the directors for the business judgment rule to apply. So then, how does this tie in with, with diligence? South African legal authors have contended that the business judgment rule does not apply to a situation where the directors have failed to exercise their duties of oversight and monitoring. And they say this on the basis that the business judgment rule will only apply in instances where the directors have made a business decision. So the failure to exercise oversight and monitoring duties amounts to a failure to act and does not translate to making a business decision. In other words, there are positive obligations in terms of supervision and monitoring. And so if the directors fail to discharge their supervision and monitoring duties in whatever context, then that failure does not amount to a business decision and is not protected by the business judgment rule. At this stage, you're probably wondering, how does all of this tie into the question of directors' liability for corporate cyber breaches? And to truly understand this, we have to go to the United States. In South Africa, we have yet to see any cases against directors against directors by a company for damages suffered by that company for corporate cyber breach. So from a legal interpretation and understanding point of view, we must look to other jurisdictions globally and how this sort of situation has been handled in those jurisdictions. The Companies Act also provides that where needed, one must consider how a certain principle is handled in a different jurisdiction and take the learnings from there. The USA is the prime candidate, as our business judgment rule and other aspects related to directors' duties have largely been adopted from there. The other reason why we look at the USA is there's been much litigation on corporate cyber breaches and directors' duties in that jurisdiction, as far back as 2008. The US courts have been known to mollycoddle their directors, usually choosing a form over substance approach. And it's actually quite bizarre. There's a number of cases that are related to the failures of directors in their duties to the company. And in most of these cases, no matter how glaringly negligent the directors have been, the courts have found directors to be protected by the business judgment rule. And that's done on the basis that those directors could prove that they had taken an informed, a deliberate, and a good faith business decision that didn't quite work out well, but yet courts have found them protected for as long as they could produce proof. The form that I'm speaking about relates to minutes of meetings where the issue that caused the company loss was discussed for literal moments. And that has been seen by US courts to afford directors protection under the business judgment rule. Despite what I have just said, the Facebook case stands out, especially given the insights that we can use from this case, which coincides with what our legal scholars in South Africa have been saying. The citation of the case is on the screen, and I would encourage everyone to look it up and have a quick read. In summary, this case is a fairly recent matter, and it involves facts in which Facebook suffered a data breach in 2015. And that data breach was not disclosed to its users. The breach occurred when consulting firm Cambridge Analytica poached the private data of 15 million users. In 2018, though, Facebook's share value reduced by 120 billion US dollars after news of the breach were made public. The background that underpins this matter is that in 2011, Facebook was issued with a consent decree by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. And that decree was issued on the basis that Facebook's data security measures were inadequate and they needed more robust and verifiable data security protocols. This case is important because in finding in favor for the plaintiffs on a different issue altogether, the key aspects of the court comments on with respect to directors' breach of their duty of oversight is pertinent for this presentation, especially within the context of what we're discussing today. The court specifically referred to the consent decree issued by the FTC to Facebook, wherein a positive obligation was placed on the company to improve their data security measures. In this regard, the court explains that liability for breach of oversight is easily ascertainable where there is a positive duty placed on the directors and they fail to discharge that duty. The court explained further that the law does not protect lawbreakers. And in the result, liability will befall the directors when they act contrary to the law. The key point, highlighted by the court is that a director cannot claim that they are loyal to the company where they are allowing the company to violate the law. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, what then does this mean in South African terms? Now, firstly, we've already established that in South Africa, the duty of oversight and monitoring is encapsulated within the duty of diligence. Okay. And then the question begs, are the positive obligations of the duty of diligence ascertainable from surrounding prevailing environmental conditions? In other words, can it be said that directors have an oversight and monitoring obligation within the South African context to prevent corporate cyber breaches, given the increased risk of such breaches? The answer to my mind is quite simply yes. Directors do have a positive oversight and monitoring obligation from the prevailing economic conditions and legislation, with a view to prevent corporate cyber breaches within the South African context. So if a director has failed to act, therefore they are not entitled to the protection afforded by the business judgment rule. In this way, the director will not evade the negligence element of delict and may subsequently be found delictually liable to the company for damages claimed by the company against them as a result of a corporate cyber breach. Now, for more context around the positive obligations component, it may be necessary to frame this concept against what we know already. So, we can all agree that legislation has placed positive obligations on companies to manage data and their IT systems in a way that breaches are avoided or prevented. From a corporate governance point of view, we can also agree that directors, in terms of King 4, have an oversight and monitoring duty over IT governance. It's another positive obligation. And then further, we can also agree from a macroeconomic point of view, corporate cyber breaches are a real threat to companies and their consumers. And so it can be reasonably inferred that positive obligations on directors in South Africa to prevent corporate cyber breaches exists. So let's tie all of this together. Now, you've been listening to me throw around some legal terms and travel over jurisdictions, and at this stage, you're probably wondering, how does all of this tie in to answer the question of liability of directors for corporate cyber breaches? So let's begin firstly with the basis that corporate cyber breaches are imminent and real threats to businesses. And there is no doubt that this topic should form part of directors' board meetings, their agendas, and their strategic plans. We know that directors are charged with managing the corporate affairs of the company and must do so with the requisite care, skill, and diligence. We have seen that the inclusion of diligence to the composite duty of care is strange and has been proposed to refer to supervision and monitoring of the affairs of the company. It suggests that directors have a positive duty to supervise, oversee, and monitor. It's a duty to act. The business judgment rule is a mechanism built into our law, imported from the United States, that provides protection to directors in the event that there are allegations that they have failed in their composite duty of care as a result of poor business decision. We've also seen that a business decision is distinct from positive obligations. Business decisions are characterized by informed, deliberate, and good faith decisions, whereas positive obligations connote a duty to act. It's a duty, you're obligated to do something. There's no discretion that's sort of applied there. Our South African scholars and US jurisprudence provide guidance in that they agree that the liability for a breach of oversight is easily ascertainable where there is a positive duty placed on directors and they fail to discharge that duty. And so from a South African context point of view, the positive duty we speak of under diligence is to take reasonable and necessary steps to prevent arguably a reasonably foreseeable corporate cyber breach. From a delictual point of view, negligence may be founded simply on the basis that the directors did not take the reasonable and necessary steps to prevent a corporate cyber breach. And though complex to argue, it's certainly not impossible. But that sort of discussion is beyond the ambit of this presentation today. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. In closing, I must say that the ground is fertile for our courts to provide us with much needed certainty on how directors' duties operate within the context of corporate cyber breaches. It was a great pleasure for me to speak to you today, and thank you for the opportunity to share my passion with you. And if you would like to read my entire research and gain further understanding into what I have just discussed, please contact me and I'll be happy to share my research with you. I will certainly review the Q&A section of the talk and answer any questions that have arisen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. I must say, it's the first time that I heard the words poppy or poppia and love in the same sentence. So that was a very, really insightful presentation. And I have to thank Bright South Africa and of course yourself for making your knowledge and experience available, and your contact details, and to all our brokers out there in the industry. You know that there are specialists at Bright who can assist you with the specific risk linked between a director's liability and cyber. We all are a little bit more aware of it now after this talk. So just to mention again, thank you to our headline partner, Bright. South Africa, we really appreciate your support. We have an event partner today, Global Choices. Our CPD partner is the Insurance Institute of South Africa, as always, and our media partner, Tony and his team at Cover Magazine. We can't have this event without speakers. And I know I mention this almost every time, but do you appreciate how much time and effort it takes to go and prepare a talk like Christopher just did? It is nerve-wracking and it's intimidating for a lot of us because there's almost 3,000 of you out there listening to the speakers. So thank you to the speakers for joining us today and making this event possible. Our last event is on the 24th of November, so please go online onto the CN&CO website, InsureTalk, go and register. You can register ahead if the links are available, and it is the most, I wouldn't say the easiest, but it's definitely the most effective way to earn your CPD points and really grow through the experience. Now I want to introduce our next speaker. I'm a little bit biased about this speaker because I've known him for, I think, about 3 decades. He's a friend of mine, Garth de Klerk. He's the CEO of the Insurance Crime Bureau. And Garth is has got a wicked sense of humor. I really love that about him. He's incredibly funny. I remember it from the very first time that I met him. But he is the CEO of the Insurance Crime Bureau in South Africa. It is a tough, interesting job, and one that we appreciate very much. He's South African, and he's extremely passionate about protecting the population of South Africa through his actions at the Insurance Crime Bureau. He's got more than 25 years experience in the non-life insurance industry, and he's worked in several international insurance markets. He really is passionate about people. If you know God, you know that this is a statement that is absolutely true, and he loves to network. He's always at all the events, and he really welcomes any opportunity to meet with anyone in the industry. Garth is extremely helpful when it comes to anything to do with crime in the insurance industry of South Africa. So I'm looking forward to this talk. Garth, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Christel, for that introduction. A little bit cheeky of Christel, because she took me back, and I was sitting pondering how life has changed and how change is constant in this environment and in our lives. And then listening to Christopher, I realized how little I know about cyber and how many clever people there are out there that we really have to spend time networking about. Christel's quite correct. I met her a couple of decades ago. We won't go into how many, but in 1998, I think she referred to her first startup. And I met this dynamic young individual who was involved in her first startup. And she's been since then involved in a number of companies and is currently involved in her current startup. And a very dynamic individual who taught me quite a bit. Casting my mind back, though, when she was talking about faxes and fax machines and that, when I studied, which was, let's call it the early 90s, a fax machine was the latest technology. In fact, when I studied, we studied telexes, we had no computers, we talked about batch processing, we had punch cards. So for those young uns that are on the call, if you want to know what a punch card is, put it in the chat and I'll embarrass you later when I answer your questions in the chat. But thank you very much for the opportunity today to share my views and opinion on what practical cybercrime looks like in our industry. And that's what we're going to talk about today is practical cybercrime. It is not about, sorry, I just want to make sure that I've got this on the correct view now. Can you see the presentation, or are you seeing the presenter's view?
Presenter's view.
You're seeing the presenter's view.
The presentation. If you could.
Are you seeing the full screen presentation?
No, not full screen.
Sorry, I beg your pardon on this. Normally. Oh, why is this thing changed up here?
Could you just accept my request?
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can now see the full presentation.
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Awesome. So just to emphasize the point, we didn't have computers when I studied. I don't normally battle with that, but I'm still new to Zoom. Thank you very much, Bright. Let's talk about cyber. And I just want to preface this with the fact that I'm not a cyber expert. I'm going to show you today what we consider to be practical cyber in the insurance industry and what we've seen in the insurance industry. I'm going to break a rule and just bar off my camera so that you're not distracted by looking at me. I'm nowhere near as comfortable to look at as Christopher and Christel. And we're going to talk to the slides that are in front of you. So a very brief introduction to the Insurance Crime Bureau. Christel has given you a brief overview. We are a non-profit organization. We represent insurance licenses within the insurance industry. We currently represent 34 different insurance licenses, and we also have 7 associate members. I'm not going to go into detail of that. I just wanted to give you the comfort that we have quite a large scope in the industry. So a lot of what we talk about today is based on experience that we've picked up on the industry, that we've seen individuals who have had these experiences in the industry. So it's not something that we are, making up as we go along. So we're going to talk about practical cybercrime. As Christel mentioned right in the intro, cybercrime is the number 2 emerging risk in our industry. It is second only to climate change. Now, that's quite a big thing to be second to, because climate change, as we know, is a massive impact on the world, the way we operate, the way we do business. We've seen just recently in countries like Australia and South Africa, as well as other countries in Europe, how massive floods, hurricanes, etc., can cause incredible damage to the environment and to the world. So we're going to have a look at practical cybercrime and what to really look out for. As I said earlier, I'm not an expert. I know there are some incredible speakers coming up after myself, after the break, I think it is, around cybercrime and what the technical terms are around cybercrime. But typically, when we look at cybercrime, I've got 3 slides which are relevant. The first one is 5 types of security breaches that we would see. And here we've got the typical phishing, ransomware, malware, identity theft, and cyber scams. I'm not going to go through each one because I'm sure that some of the speakers will take you through what phishing means and what ransomware does and what malware does. And I'm sure all of you have heard that before. There are 5 ways that we recommend to spot fake emails and to stay safe. The one is no personalization. They don't have your contact name. The other one is the typical spelling and grammar errors. The one is where they're requesting personal information from you, where they have a high level of urgency or they make threats. And then the last one is the fake addresses or web links. These, again, are things that you should know. I'm sure all of you by now, and there's over 2,000 of you in the webinar, have read articles on how to spot a fake email and the fact that they keep the spelling bad because they're looking for people that are maybe not as cyber smart as others and are not looking for errors in the spelling, etc., etc. Let me tell you, I have seen some banking cyber frauds where the emails are perfect. That email looks exactly like my bank email. It had a intention to get my information and it looked perfect. So we cannot always just rely on these 5 or 6 red flags. There's other things that we have to do. And then lastly, there's the typical tips of how to prevent cyber crimes from affecting your business. And again, I'm sure some of the speakers will give us much more in-depth analysis of how to protect your business than I am qualified to do. But it's the typical, you must hype up your internal security awareness. You must be prepared. The previous speaker, Christopher, said there's only 2 types of businesses, those who have been hacked and those who will be hacked. Prepare for the invasion. Hire a security expert. Protect your computers. Restrict access to your sensitive information. Very interesting what Christopher took us through, the difference between a cyber breach and a data breach. Sometimes they don't have to breach your physical computer protection in order to get to your data. Understand the differences. I really like that number 5, hire a security expert. If you spoke to my wife or my daughters, they would tell you that I'm the most impractical, useless person that they know. If a light bulb needs changing, I will bring in somebody to change a light bulb, because if I don't, I will break it and I will end up spending more fixing the light where I try to change the light bulb. Don't think that you can wing cybersecurity. Talk to an expert, talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about. Similar to if you were dealing with your clients and they say, don't worry, I don't need a broker's analysis of my insurance portfolio. I can do this myself. And you sit and look at them and think, really, do you understand all the technical wording? Do you understand the first losses and the excesses, etc.? This is what cyber is about as well. All right, so there's 3 slides of the what I call the typical cyber stuff, where there's a lot more clever people out there that can explain it to you. It leaves me feeling a little bit concerned and a little bit confused at times, because all of those areas have got massive subsections of knowledge that you need to be up to date on, because cyber criminals change and evolve as we speak. So I'm often left thinking, but what do I have to do as an individual to protect myself, to protect me? Because if I protect me, I will then also protect the company and I'll protect those around me. So when I'm talking now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how to protect you. I want to talk a little bit more about the dark side, not the dark web, but the dark side of the web. So let's take a little bit of time to take a look at you. Have a look around you. For those of you working from the office, maybe not so relevant, but for those of you working from home, take a look at your desk. You've probably got a laptop in front of you, you've got an iPad or some type of tablet, you've got your phone, you might have a printer that's connected to your network. At home, you might have something like cameras, etc., etc. They are talking about over 50 billion devices being connected to the internet by 2030. Now, I've read this study a couple of times, and that 50 billion has been used for years now. I think it's probably more than that. But 50 billion devices, let's take a look at your life. How many of you drive a sophisticated car? How many of you walk around with your phone attached to your hip or in your handbag at all times? How many of you have got trackers in your vehicle? How many of you have got security at home, which include cameras and Wi-Fi connections, so that you can monitor your house and monitor the activity that's going on if an alarm goes off, etc.? How many of you have now got solar systems at home because of load shedding that you can also log into from a remote scenario and check what your solar panels and your batteries are doing? These days, even medical equipment like pacemakers have got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi receptors. So you as an individual have probably got 4 or 5 or up to 10 different devices that are constantly connecting to the internet. And what those devices are doing is they are tracking you. They are watching where you go, what you do, what you like, what you Google, what TV you watch. I actually meant to also put a Netflix banner on this particular slide, because all these devices are profiling you as an individual. They are collecting information on you as an individual. My favorite is Google. I use Google a lot. I take a lot of photographs. Wherever I walk around, I review places, I review restaurants, and I give Google my soul. Google tracks me wherever I go. I also use Google Maps to track my family members with their permission, of course, so that if my daughter goes to university, I know when she's got there, if she's safe, if she's out at night with her friends, I can see that she's arrived safely and that she's operating in the area that I expected. So Google is a friend of mine, and I use it as a product to enrich my life. However, Google then takes all of my information and sells it to Facebook. It tells them what I've Googled last. If I'm looking for a swimming pool renovation, the next thing, what will I see on my Facebook feed? Swimming pool renovation suppliers. It does the same with Instagram. It's got a similar relationship with Twitter. TikTok I don't really use, and Snapchat I stay far away from. But Google has everything on me. In your life, how do you protect yourself from giving away too much information? And this is what we talk about when we talk about the practical side of cybercrime. Ladies and gentlemen, so often we get calls to say, my email was intercepted and they have instructed my financial broker to transfer 20,000 Rand from my investment account to another bank account, and it's now disappeared. We had a case last week or the week before last week where, in fact, the gentleman had been hacked, inverted commas in his terms, and they transferred a significant amount of money from a South African bank account to a Swiss bank account. And the investment banker didn't even think to pick up the phone and confirm the transaction. He wasn't hacked. He had probably clicked on some or other Facebook link that asked him, what do you think you're going to look like in 50 years' time? Or what is your future career? Or what does your perfect girlfriend look like? Or what's your favorite food? And gone through some or other survey. And then it says, log on here to tell us whether or not you want to see the results. And you log in there and you put Garth the Clack, you put your latest password, and Facebook has now, or these suspects using Facebook have now got your logon details and they've got your password. So all of these social media platforms, fantastic, they're fun, but they are collecting information on you. A very practical one that I'd like to take you through is in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see, sorry, the middle corner, you will see the parking apps, the free parking apps. And these apps are very, very convenient. So if I go to my favorite mall, I don't have to worry about getting a ticket anymore and then going and paying for my ticket afterwards. All I have to do is register my license plate on an app and I get parking at a discounted rate. So instead of paying 10 Rand for an hour, I'm going to pay 5 Rand or 8 Rand or whatever. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, if something is free or if something is discounted to you, then you become the product. Simple as that. Let me say that again. If somebody is providing you something for free, you are the product. There's a very well-known mall in Gauteng, it's very close to where I work, where you can get a parking app. And what it does is it gives you almost 50% of parking. Very, very convenient. You drive up, there's a camera at the entrance, the AMPR recognizes your number plate. It lets you in and it charges your credit card when you leave at 50% of the existing rate. It's fantastic. What it also does is it doesn't stop at parking. It tracks you as you move within the center. Now, again, if any of you use Google like I do, Google will tell you if you've been to the Wimpy and Fourways, and it'll say to you, listen, what did you think of the Wimpy and Fourways? Can you give us a rating? And if you took a photograph of your cappuccino, upload the photograph of your cappuccino. This particular app works on the Bluetooth receptors within the shopping center. It will then track you whether you go to Versace, Prada, and Hugo Boss, or whether, like me, you go to Edgar's, Checkers, and maybe Incredible Connection. It then profiles you and says, right, Garth likes Checkers, Edgar's, and Incredible Connection. The next time Incredible Connection has a sale, I will send Garth adverts about that sale. Somebody who goes to Versace and Prada and Hugo Boss, the next time one of those shops have a sale, I will push adverts to that individual related to their needs. And what it does further is it continues to track you once you leave the shopping center. It will then see whether you shop at that mall and then I shop in Fourways, for example, or whether I go from that mall and I go to Hyde Park. Because that then is a much better profile of an individual who I can sell additional products to. So really, when we download these apps to our phone, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to think. You are getting something cheaper. You are getting something for free. You become the product. When you get cheaper parking, believe me, you are giving something in return. That might be your information, it might be your location, it might be whatever. And then one of the things that we do at the ICB is a lot of law enforcement support. And I want to just advise you here. And again, last night I was chatting to one of the colonels that's involved in child abuse cases in South Africa, and they were involved in a big arrest, and the case was prosecuted, and there was finality of it yesterday. They put a child abuser away for many, many years. Be aware of what's going on in your kids' lives. That picture there of the sweetie coming out of the screen and how this work from home and having social media in your life, etc., is properly affecting your kids. Be aware that it's not a joke. There are genuine syndicates that are involved in child trafficking, child grooming, and child pornography on simplistic platforms like Instagram and like Facebook. Instagram is probably more prolific at the moment because Facebook is actually only for older people like myself. The younger people are on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. I continuously have conversations with my daughters around the danger of talking to strangers. When I was younger, it was easier. My parents taught me about stranger danger, and it was easy to identify a stranger because when somebody walked up to me in the street, had a sweetie in their hand, and I didn't know them. Nowadays, when you're on social media and your kids are interacting with other kids of their age, they might be 14, 15 years old, and they get a friend request from another person that proposes to be 14 or 15 years old, they have to be careful. One of the things about Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat is that the more likes you get, the more popular you are. I know this. I've got two young daughters. Well, I won't say they're young anymore, but they're both in their teens. And the more likes their friends get on Instagram or TikTok, the more popular they feel. In order to get more likes, they accept friend requests from anybody who asks. And on occasion, they have had friends that have been burnt, where they have had people talking to them, pretending to be a 14, 15-year-old girl or guy, and it turns out that they are not. Believe me, child grooming, child trafficking, and child porn in South Africa is real. It's a threat, and it's something that we need to be aware of as individuals. So when you're having conversations with your kids, please advise them to be aware of who they talk to. It's a difficult conversation, and in some cases, it's a losing battle. But when we talk about real life experiences, this is one of the biggest areas that concerns me. So to wrap it up, and I said in the beginning, cyber, big emerging risk, and it's a fast-paced environment. I genuinely didn't have computers when I studied. We were studying telexes and batch punch cards, etc. What computers are going to look like between now and the end of our career, we've got absolutely no idea. What we do know is that it's going to be very different to what we face now. If you had told me 20 years ago that what I'm holding in my hand now, my cell phone, was going to be as powerful or as important to me as it is now, I would have accused you of all types of paranoia and craziness. Technology is evolving incredibly quickly. The risk around this technology evolves incredibly quickly. This can be incredibly useful, but it can also be incredibly dangerous. So the simple advice that we encourage everybody to do when you are interacting with people, whether it's physically or virtually, is think. Any form of interaction with a person whom you do not know, think about it, especially if you're selling things online or interacting online with people that you don't know. Think about it. Read a lot. There's a lot of valuable information out there on the latest and greatest schemes, on the latest modus operandi, and on how to avoid becoming a sucker. Don't trust people. Whenever I do training, I always say the only person I trust is my wife, and that's even got its limitation. believe me that there are people out there that are looking to take what you have. Always check and verify. Please ask questions, make calls if needed. Please be aware of what information you share. Don't be scared to interact on a social media platform or a technology platform, but be aware of the risks that you're facing. And that's the message that, as the Insurance Crime Bureau, we have today. Cybercrime is an incredibly technical, complicated area. It's got legislation to stick. It's got challenges that we don't necessarily understand as insurance experts. Hire an expert, talk to somebody who knows better. But please, ladies and gentlemen, be careful. That's it for today. I'm going to spend some time in the chat looking through if there are any questions that are relevant, and I'll answer the questions. But I wish you a great rest of the day. And again, thank you very much to InsureTalk and to Bright for sponsoring the session. I hope this has been valuable to you, and I hope you have a great day for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Garth, I can now add to the list of things that I said about you before is that you're very good at scaring me as well. But seriously, I think we live in a country that is violent, and we are very, very aware of crime, but we always think about it, the physical crime. And to now make that connection, the story that you told about Google, the apps tracking you after you've left the parking facility, having this online sort of presence of you, even post having used the app, that is really, really scary. At the same time, having things like Life 360 and being able to track your own children gives us that benefit of an extra sense of security. So I think it's all about balancing the tools that are out there and being very, very aware of the fact that we can be taken advantage of, and it can lead to criminal activity and intent. So thank you for sharing that with us, and it was lovely listening to you. Our next speaker is Madam Thokozile Mahlangu. Thokozile is the CEO of the Insurance Institute of South Africa. You might not know this, or you might know, but we broadcast this conference from the IISA's offices in Sandton. It's a wonderful pleasure to be able to come here every month. So we thank you, and we look forward to your industry update, Thokozile.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all keeping well. As you may be aware, we have launched the AIE 2023. At the risk of sounding like a parrot, the conference is taking place on the 24th to the 26th of July 2023. This period between now and the 20th of December is super early bird registration rates, so do take advantage of the super early bird registration. Visit our website, click on the tab AIE 2023 and register to secure your spot, whether in person or virtually. I just want to repeat, it's a super early bird period that you do not want to miss. After the 20th of December, we will move on to normal rates. There will be normal rates for corporate partners, normal rates for members and non-members. So if you are not a member, it's also an opportunity to take advantage of the discounted conference rate that are available to members only. Become a member and enjoy the discounted rates, one of the benefits that we give to our members. The theme for the conference is collaborate, cultivate, create. There is no doubt that collaboration is a powerful tool for businesses. It's an opportunity to all come together to design products, solutions that are meaningful to our customers, to identify those products that would benefit both the industry, each organization, and members as well. So join us as we unpack the topics that will come underneath each word of the theme: collaborate, cultivate, and create. Let's create magic. Let's create solutions, meaningful solutions, while we take advantage of all the changes that we are going through and we will be going through in future. So I want to invite you once more to take advantage of the super early bird registration, which will close on the 20th. While on the members conversation, we recently had a member recognition event where we recognized new members for the cycle 2021-2022, that is from June 2021 to May 2022. We recognized new members, we recognized upgraded members. Those are members who moved from different levels of membership to the higher levels, and we also recognized long-serving members. All these members that we recognized are members in good standing. So good standing from a CPD compliance, good standing from a membership fees perspective. We will be having another event, member recognition event in April next year, where we will be recognizing new members, long-serving members, as well as upgraded members for the cycle June 2022 to May 2023. So if you are not a member, take advantage of this opportunity. Be associated with a SAQA-approved professional body. And being a member denotes that you have a high level of experience, expertise, and knowledge. It puts you in good standing within the industry. So do take advantage of the opportunity to become a member and yes, enjoy the discounted rates for conference while you elevate your standing as a professional member in the industry. Once more, I just want to remind you to visit the website, click on the button that says Become a Member, populate your information, submit all the required documents, and become a member. And if you have been a member, a licentiate, or an associate for more than a year, you may be eligible to upgrade the membership to a higher level. So I invite all of you who are already members to also consider upgrading your membership levels and get to the highest designation, which is the fellow membership level. I look forward to welcoming each and every one of you as members of the ISA. I cannot overemphasize that being affiliated with a SAQA-approved professional body puts you in good standing within the industry. So if you are not a member, once more, visit our website and click on the button that says Become a Member and become a member approved by the ISA. I look forward to chatting with you next month. I'm sure that will be the last InsureTalk before we end the year. So end the year big. Become a professional member. Also register for conference and take advantage of the super early registration rates. I'll see you soon.
Thanks for that update, Thokozile. And I just want to reiterate, the African Insurance Exchange, the conference at Sun City, or the Sun City Conference as we like to refer to, is absolutely worth your time attending. We spend so much time behind our screens, and once a year you can get out there and connect with people in person. So the link is posted in the chat, so we really, please go and register and join us. I went to this past conference this year, and I just enjoyed myself so much. It was really fantastic, and really, I really felt invigorated and like I've grown after that conference. So I want to encourage you to join us. Next up, we have our usual 10-minute entertainment break. We've got a fantastic entertainer up today. It's a lady called Maya Spector. She's a rising talent in the South African music industry and in the theatre world. She comes from a culturally diverse musical family. And listen to this, this is amazing. She grew up in Japan, Swaziland, America, and South Africa. Her voice is textured. We hope you enjoy this entertainment piece that we have for you now. And before we go over to Maya, I just want to mention something else. I mentioned it in the chats as well. Don't pose your questions in the chat. There's a Q&A section. So please, guys, if you've got questions for the speakers, go to the Q&A section. Think about what you want to ask them while you enjoy Maya's wonderful performance. And we'll see you in about 10 minutes' time.
Hi, my name is Maya Spector, and I'm really excited to be here at the 27th edition of InsureTalk, and I am here to sing you a couple of songs that are keeping within the theme there. So the first song that I'm going to sing to you is my song called Eyes for You, hoping that you guys are going to keeping an eye on us. Here is my song Eyes for You off of my debut album Honey and Heartache. Enjoy. You are poetry in motion. You mean everything to me. You connect me to the angels so high above. You excite me and invite me to be myself with you. My eyes can tell a story of the love I feel for you. The perfect song, my melody, the rhythm of your heart. I'll sing for you, I'll follow you from the very start, 'cause I only have eyes for you. You are my special book I just can't put down, a favorite song I keep singing. You took the darkness out my skies and let the sun shine in. You appeared just like a rainbow on another stormy day. You stepped right in and took my hand and blew those clouds away. The perfect song, my melody, the rhythm of your heart. I'll sing for you, I'll follow you from the very start, 'cause I only have eyes, only have eyes, only have eyes. I only have eyes for you. Do 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 you do. Do 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 you do. Do 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 you do. Do 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 ya do da oh eh. Do 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 you do. Do 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 you do. Oh. So here's my second song, keeping within the theme. It is a song not by me, but by the great songwriter Sia, and this song is called Titanium. You shout it out, but I can't hear I'm talking loud, not saying much. I'm criticized, but all your bullets ricochet. You shoot me down, but I get up. I'm bulletproof, nothing to lose. Fire away, fire away. Ricochet, you take your aim. Fire away, fire away. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. But it's you who'll have further to fall. Ghost town and heart in love. You raise your voice. Sticks and stones may bring my bones. I'm talking loud, not saying much. Nothing to lose. Fire away, fire away. Ricochet, you take your aim. Fire away, fire away. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. Stone heart, machine gun, firing at the ones who run. Stone heart loves bulletproof glass. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. I am titanium. Thank you so much for tuning in, and my name again is Maya Spector, and you can find me on Instagram at Maya Papaya Spector, and you can find me on Facebook under Maya Spector, and I hope to join you again soon, and have a lovely day. Thank you.
Okay, and we are back. Thanks, Maya, for that wonderful entertainment. So we're going to change gears a little bit, and we are going to hear from the guys over at CyberSafe and FishShield on the current state of cyber threats, emerging trends. Did I forget to set my mic? I didn't put my mic on. I'm sorry, guys. I hope you can hear me. On the current state of cyber threats, emerging trends, and how individuals and SMEs can mitigate against them. Is the sound good enough? Should I pick up the mic? Are we good? Okay. So I want to introduce our next speakers to you. It is the first speaker that we have. There's two of them that are going to talk to us on this topic. And the first speaker that we have up is McLeod Burrell. He's the GM for Sales and Technology at Fish Shield. He's the co-founder and the CEO of CyberSafe Consultants. He's got a combined 11 years of experience through numerous roles in the IT security and cyber insurance sectors, and he specializes in cybersecurity, solution management, and legal compliance. So McLeod is going to join us, and then Sarel Lamprecht. Sarel is the managing director and co-founder of Fish Shield. He's an engineer turned insurance product provider, and he has a great love for games, books, and mastering the art of golf. It's an interesting mix of hobbies right there, Sarel. Sarel believes in doing what makes you happy. It's clear from his hobbies. And living in the moment whilst being conscious of your actions and how they impact on the world. So over to the two of you, McLeod and Sarel, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much for that lovely intro. Just to start off, I'm from CyberSafe, so I will handle the first portion of the presentation. So it was quite interesting earlier listening to it was Garth's presentation, and very refreshing for me to hear, you know, individuals and organizations, especially in the insurance industry, making light of cybercrime, but more so on the mobile phone side of things. So if I may, I just want to, I'm going to stop my video here and start sharing a screen for you guys. Just to kind of give you guys a bit of an idea of where the current threats are going in terms of cybercrime. So guys, if anybody can see that. All right, so I've got limited time here, so I'm going to try my best and get straight to the point, ladies and gentlemen. Just to give you an idea, guys, South Africa is ranked 6th amongst the world's most affected countries, guys. Last year, there was an average of 97 victims per hour. 95% of the malware that I'm sure you guys hear of is delivered through email, which is a large issue because obviously everyone uses that as a form of communication nowadays in business as well as on their phones. So it's estimated so far globally that there's been a $6 trillion damage that has been attributed to cybercrime, with 33 billion accounts that will be breached by next year. So there's always that conversation of, oh, is iOS better or more secure than Windows? Well, that's debatable, but so we've seen that 97.2% of malware was blocked last year that is targeted at PCs and laptops running Microsoft Windows, guys. And that's why when I'll get to the solutions later on, patching and updating your software is paramount. It's one small thing that you as individuals can do to prevent exploits of malware on your devices. We've seen that 70% of small businesses are completely unprepared for a cyber attack. A very recent study by IBM, as I'm sure you guys know, a large multinational organization, they released an annual cost of data breach report, which revealed that the average cost of a data breach in South Africa is at an all-time high of almost 50 million rand, guys. So it is growing. Cybercrime is here to stay, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse. I've put just 2 small examples on the bottom right there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure everyone knows of the TransUnion breach. Experian, guys, that was also quite alarming, considering that in that breach, almost as many as 24 million South Africans and almost 800,000 businesses, personal information and data was breached in that cause. So another one, guys, being in insurance, you guys know about Liberty. As I mentioned, just with regards to time, I could go on for hours regarding the types of breaches that have happened locally, and you know, the very many statistics that are surrounded with them. But I thought, you know, a lot of these organizations are JSE listed companies, meaning that from an IT perspective, you know, they've invested hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in solutions such as hardware and software, as well as staff, to mitigate against these cyber crimes, and yet they still get breached. So the question lies, ladies and gentlemen, what about the SMEs? So let me just check that. Yeah. So the SMEs are are probably most at risk. And a lot of SMEs are being breached nowadays. And I'm sure a lot of people might have heard from a cousin or a family friend of some sort that, the go-to word of ransomware, which is a terrible form of malware. But also people having invoices with banking details that have changed. In some way, shape, or form, people have been exposed to cybercrime or fraud in that way, shape, or form. And one of the challenges that is faced by SMEs, guys, is firstly the lack of skill. A lot of the cybersecurity skill in this organization goes to cybersecurity companies that may outsource their services to companies, or large organizations such as banks. A lot of IT personnel and generalist IT companies are just that. They're generalists. They might be able to fix your printer, set up your email for you, fix your Wi-Fi, but they are not cyber specialists. Another important and inhibiting factor for SMEs in this fight against cybercrime is the prohibitive costs for the solutions that are involved in actually protecting them. For example, a firewall, or the latest and greatest advanced persistent threat antivirus. And having those solutions monitored by specialists on an ongoing basis far outweighs some organizations' budgets. Now, with the lack of skill and the prohibitive costs, creates a lack of visibility into the efficacy of those controls. So when we say controls, we're talking about things like the antivirus, which is on your laptops in an organization, firewalls, which is responsible for protecting your network. Those are various controls. So with the lack of skill and the prohibitive costs, there's a lack of visibility and understanding if those controls are actually configured properly for the use of that business, and to understand the outputs that those solutions give to the people that are utilizing it. Followed by that is a lack of context. So when people generally get breached, they don't know how or necessarily when. And the reason being is sometimes viruses such as malware and ransomware lies dormant in their systems. There's one strain of ransomware that we've seen that will lie dormant in a company's network and slowly start deleting the backup files. Once it's deleted the backup files, it will then corrupt all the Windows software on the machines to slow them down. And then, of course, ladies and gentlemen, the extreme nature of risks. The rate at which these threats are being propagated and made by organizations and individuals far outweighs those of some solutions that can be updated. So I'll give you an example, guys. Cyber criminals are not the typical Hollywood-based people in basements that are sitting there hacking. They are run like legitimate organizations. They have accountants. They have set times with lunch breaks, and they are selling and developing malware as a service that is used to be sold on the black market. Guys, the emerging trends, and this is, like I said, very refreshing that Garth touched on it earlier, is mobile devices, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot stress enough. If you think about it, you use your mobile device for everything. Almost everyone has a smartphone nowadays. And it's not just individual information, personal information on your devices, but you're also accessing your banking. You're also accessing corporate information, which is a backdoor threat to the organization in which you work for or in which you own. So to give you an idea, guys, Garth had mentioned, the apps, such as social media and so on. And yes, those are very dangerous in terms of tracking, your habits, maybe for marketing purposes, but there are far more nefarious apps out there that are very, very detrimental to individuals. As an example, last year, you can see almost 12,000 new Android malware programs released per day. 18.4 million cases of mobile malware were identified last year, guys. And 83% of those phishing attacks took place outside of the inbox, in text messages or in apps like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. I'll give you guys an example. As an avid rugby fan, I will see a link that may be on a news outlet, or even scrolling through Facebook, I'll see, for example, the top 10 best rugby schools in South Africa. I'm prone to clicking on that because that's my interest. As we know, there's a certain Springbok that's been in the tabloids for various reasons. And at 7:15 in the morning, when clicking on that link to find out more, the solution I had on my phone blocked it for spyware. Now, I want to ask, how many South Africans do you think clicked on that link that morning and to have their devices infected or prone to a threat of that nature? So a recent report last year showed that Google had identified 1.2 million suspicious applications and Apple identified 1.6 million. So the reason is that a lot of these apps on the App Store are benign at first. So on face value, when they might scan them to take a look, there's no threat. It's only once that app is installed on your device does it then start communicating to a command and control server elsewhere, somewhere around the world, that starts taking control of your device, that starts taking information off of that device. And I want to give you an example, guys. If you take a look to the right here, Google Play Store, antivirus super cleaner, that's actually Sharkbot, which was identified late last year and has now evolved. And this is just one of many examples. It's a very, very dangerous application to have on your device. And essentially, it enables adversaries to autofill the legitimate, autofills fields in legitimate mobile banking apps. So when you have your two-factor authentication PIN that you use when you're doing a transfer, it can intercept that and start sending legitimate transfers into different bank accounts. What's scary is to the individual who might be a bit tech savvy and say, you know what, let me put something on my device. They're being duped into putting a nefarious app on their device. Just to give you an example of how these threats are actually affecting us as South Africans, I've looked through the various SABRIC reports. We can see there in 2017, just shy of 58 million rand loss attributed to mobile banking fraud. 2018, almost 105 million rand. 2019, 308. 2020, 309 million rand loss. And very recently, I just established that there was 438 million rand loss attributed to banking fraud countrywide last year, guys. They did say that last year, although the number of attacks had reduced, the amount in which people were exploited for individually had increased. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I thought I'd just get straight to the point, given our time constraints. But I just thought, I think a lot of people can be overwhelmed with cybercrime. And it is true. People just need to be more aware of it and how you conduct yourselves. So very simply put, guys, there are various but very simple things we can do as individuals and as businesses to mitigate these risks. The first is backups. And I know everyone harps on about backups, and yes, we do backups, but you need to do off-site incremental backups. Because let's say you do backup on a Monday, you do a backup on a Wednesday, and on the Thursday, your company gets breached. You then go back up on the Wednesday, but you might be backing up that dormant virus. So it's good to have increments of backups, and as I said, off-site, so that those backups can't be affected as well. Guys, technology is your friend. So just regular system updates, guys. Your antiviruses, update them. When your devices, your laptops, your phones, when they have updates, there's a reason for it. It's to patch vulnerabilities that have been exploited. Get yourselves checked. It's very easy to have assessments done on your organization that are relatively cost effective. With this, there are various mobile applications that you can use to protect your device with regards to browsing the web. I say most importantly, employee awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, technology is our friend again. Google. Understand how organizations and individuals are being breached, how to identify phishing emails, so to speak. And then most importantly, I feel, is cyber insurance. There are a lot of insurers in South Africa that provide insurance for your businesses as well as for you as individuals. There is no silver bullet with cybercrime, ladies and gentlemen. As you've seen with JSE listed companies being affected, there is no silver bullet. So I'm a big advocate of cyber insurance, whether it's commercial or individual. And then I will be happy, ladies and gentlemen, to take some questions in the Q&A, and then I will hand over to Sorrel.
Thank you, Mac. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Based on the discussion that Garth and McLeod has given, I mean, mine is going to be much less flashy, all the statistics and everything. Everyone's been scared, and I'm actually going to adapt my presentation and just jump in right into typical elements of what an cyber insurance product would be made out of, specifically for consumers and small businesses. Corporates are a whole different kettle of fish, and I won't be touching too much on them at this point. So I'm just going to share my screen. And jumping past that, I'm just going to jump straight into what the solutions are made out of, specifically what people should look out for, elements that it comprises of, and certain pitfalls, and what I believe how we as an industry should come together and work together, not in isolated segments, to find a better solution going forward. Because as we all know, I mean, what Garth and Max said, how I will summarize that is it's not a case of if, but when you will be breached. And then secondly, how you protect yourself is what level of information do you share that you are happy to be breached or to become public information, because privacy is a word that I won't use at all these days in the digital age, unfortunately. So typical pillars of modern cyber insurance solutions, both on the consumer and the small businesses, or what I would like to call as the person on the street or the business on the street, the people who need it most, are education, which Garth shared a whole lot amount of. Then the risk assessment and mitigation tools, which is the security tools that McLeod and CyberSafe offer. Then there are additional services, which are typically a pre and post incident response services. And then naturally you get your insurance benefits, which I will get into the details of the two areas in terms of personal and commercial. Now, the scope for a typical commercial insurance cover includes, it's three pillars. It's first party losses, third party losses, and then also breach and notification costs. Those are typically what you would expect to find in a reasonable SME product. Now, the first party losses, it is subdivided in business interruption losses, which are typically the company's operating profits, operating expenses, and additional costs incurred to stop or get back up and running as fast as possible. Then you have data restoration costs, which are any costs to regain, replace, or restore data that is damaged, lost, or corrupted. There are cyber extortion costs, which are costs to investigate and or resolve a threat, and in limited cases also pay a ransom. I know there are disputes about should ransom be paid or not, but I will get into the approach of how these risks should be viewed in a short bit to just explain why this is important. And then finally, there's also computer crime, which has also been touched upon, where effectively it's three areas where if cyber criminals hack into your company's network, they gain access to your bank accounts, they transfer money out, and naturally that will be unauthorized fraud, what we like to call it, and the banks won't reimburse that, and there's typically a portion that will be covered under that. Then there's another area where your network is breached, the incoming emails are intercepted, and the banking information is changed. The legitimate payer on the company side pays out the money, it's going to a fraudulent third party, that money is gone. And then an area that very few people have a look at is, what about everything outside of your network? There's a whole bunch of information that's flowing out there, and that emails can be intercepted quite easily, like Max said. So the emails come from a legitimate source, it's intercepted or man-in-the-middle attacks, banking details are changed, you as a company receive it, you have your network security in place, it picks up nothing because it came from an external source. Payments are loaded, fraudulent third party, that money's gone. And there are also certain policies that do cover all of these benefits, just to have a spotlight on it, what to look out for. Then under third-party losses, it's typically third-party claims, which are any written demands for compensation and or any other legal remedies to resolve a third-party claim. Now, as an example of that might be, is, let's say, the Experian breach or the Liberty breach. As an example, they would then, a client's information would be leaked and they would deem that they have been prejudiced or they have suffered a loss. And then they file a legal claim against Liberty themselves, and any legal costs or for the claim thereof of that third-party claims against Liberty would be covered under the third-party claim section, specifically under third-party losses. Then you have multimedia liability, which are typically damage or defense costs against slander, defamation, IP infringement, all of these, what do you call them, influences. There we go. If they suffer any losses or slander or damages, that is something that will typically be covered under a multimedia liability extension under a cyber insurance policy. And then finally, the one that probably everyone knows most about is the regulatory expenses and penalties, strictly relating to POPIA and also payment card industry. So any regulations set out for your protection of information of any client's personal identifiable information, if those regulations or rules are breached, the regulator or the government can issue fines, and that would typically be covered under that section. Then another important, which is quite often looked over section of these policies, are emergency response costs. And that typically is all the forensic investigation costs, the legal, the credit monitoring, the notification costs. Effectively, what it is if something goes wrong, if there's a breach, the people who come out to investigate, to find out and notify everyone of the breach, that is what would be covered under these sections of the policies. Then there's also proactive mitigation and monitoring tools, which are typically either security software, or in the case of specifically for businesses, they are penetration tests for corporates. And more recently in the market, that's become much more affordable, is vulnerability scans, where companies come and do it's effectively a remote mini penetration test just to see what your company's assessment is before a risk goes on book. And also, more importantly, it is something that can be done continuously. And then finally, the fourth pillar of that is a resolution center, where effectively how anyone would know that as is a first responder service. So an insured, if something goes wrong, they know there's one point of contact that they can call on any queries. It might be a claim if something goes wrong, and that first responder service liaises with all the forensic investigations, the notification, all the outsourcing of those functions. It's a single point of contact for the insureds themselves to have peace of mind, because I mean, if your business is shut down or you suffer a breach, it's all about crisis management at the end of the day. Then the typical scope of a personal insurance cover is it's mostly first-party losses. And to be honest, the biggest risk is the monetary loss that people suffer. There's been the personal insurance side has been slowish for the last 10 years, where it's effectively just been monetary losses. And the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a flooding of insurance products on the market, which typically include under first-party losses, it's online shopping modules, which are damaged or non-delivery of goods. I mean, you order something from Amazon, something comes, or you thought you ordered something from Amazon, or legitimately from Amazon, a pair of boots, it comes and it's something completely different, or it's damaged and the insurance doesn't, or the shipping insurance doesn't cover it. Then there's cyber extortion, which is a ransom payment, or you clicked on some email where you should not have gone, or a link on a website, and you get an email saying that I know you visited XYZ site. I'm not going to say that out loud. It's normally adult sites, and we've hacked your webcam, and we have photos of you, and they want X amount of money, or they will post it everywhere. So that's where the education also comes in, is what information are you happy to be shared with the public at the end of the day. Then there's also data restoration costs, costs incurred to restore data on devices, same as for commercial. Identity theft restoration costs, that is something that has probably been around for the longest time, where it is the legal costs to get yourself de-blacklisted if someone impersonated your identity and opened up an Edgar's account or something like that. There's not, in my personal opinion, there's not much legs in that portion of it. And more recently, what people have also brought into that extension is a loss of income clause, where if the time you have to take off to go to SAPS and all the credit bureaus to get yourself de-blacklisted, that is an actual benefit that people can utilize. And something new is also cyber mobbing or bullying extensions, where it's trauma counseling, typically more targeted at kids, and or relocation costs. As an example, is someone's daughter is on a group at school, and for some reason photos were stolen or a phone was stolen and photos were taken, and they're bullying her, where it gets to a point where the child needs to be relocated somewhere else. And that is typically something where the trauma counseling to help them process what has happened to them, and also moving potentially to another school in terms of the school fees that are not refundable. That is something to look out for also under those policies. And then finally, in my opinion, the computer crime element, which is by far the biggest risk. It's like Max showed, what was it, the 438 million through mobile banking apps, the money that was lost, is the scams that we deal with. I mean, even the hardiest of people will get scammed at some point in time. Me, myself, I should probably not say this out loud, but I make many different profiles just to test this out, to see how they operate. So it is alarming to see what they come up with and how legitimate these scams can look. Then there's also a limited third-party losses. It's not really that important, such as cyber liability for slander, defamation, and breach of terms and services. I would say that's probably more of a marketing ploy than an actual benefit that can be claimed upon. And then proactive mitigation and monitoring tools specifically aimed at mobile devices. Everyone's data, everything is being condensed into your mobile device. So try and secure it as much as you can, because that is the point of contact. All the recovery emails, the two-step verifications, the push notifications, everything goes to the mobile device. If that thing is breached, then, well, the sky's the limit. And then finally, it's also a reactive resolution center, just a point of contact that you can phone, that someone helps you and calm you down and take you through all the necessary steps to potentially claim on an insurance policy, well, what benefit you can claim on, and also or just try and mitigate the risk itself before it becomes a loss. Now, the problems with the solutions that are currently in the market is, as was said earlier, the industry is in constant flux. That is something that I think that not many people are ready to deal with, because the goalposts change the whole time. So the established insurance approaches that people are trying to employ, where it's data, years and data, and then trying to find a solution and understand the risk, it is different. It changes. Information that was relevant 6 months ago on risks, or even last month, is not necessarily relevant now. So you need a robust solution that can cater for the changing, well, the change of the emerging risks. Thirdly, only some of the benefits and limits are relevant. And that is something that I see quite often, is all the bells and whistles are thrown in terms of marketing material and potential benefits. But at the end of the day, if you look under the hood, the real risks are maybe sub-limited to portions of whatever the overall limit is. So just be mindful of specific risks and that there's full benefit that can be claimed upon. Because my philosophy is, irrespective of price, if there's enough value in the product and people can claim from it, they will pay for it. It's not a free service. That leads me into my next point, which is pricing competitiveness based on exclusions, where the approach is more to have exclusive policies based on exclusions rather than having an inclusive policy that is more of an umbrella cover. Another big issue that, in my opinion, this is all just based on my opinion and what I see in the market, is the modular choice issues. Now, corporates and people who have teams of experts who deal with these risks and security on a daily basis, they are better equipped to know exactly where their exposure is, but any consumer or average Joe business on the street who probably don't even have a security expert, how are they supposed to know what their risks are? So now they're flooded with choices that they can choose from, where the process of getting someone on an insurance policy is already cumbersome, because the information that is gathered or is asked to incept a policy is way too complicated. So it just adds a compounding effect of fear and discontent for the potential insured to get the cover that they actually need. And then finally, most of the essential tools and ancillary services are often optional extras on policies. So they are there, you can tick them if you want, but again, it comes down to the modular choice issue. So how do we address these issues? It's just taking a step back and simplifying everything. Try and simplify as much as you can. Now, that being said, for a specific target market, and I'm not referring to the corporates, it's the whole different kettle of fish, but to gather the baseline information that you need to incept a policy. And from there, try and gain information on the client's risk profile and their cyber hygiene from there on going in. So to do that, instead of having a whole policy with 10 different triggers and scopes, what triggers the policy, rather take a step back and say, okay, for cyber insurance, most of these risks are, there's some form of breach. So rather define that as a cyber emergency that can include everything that is typically spoken about, such as your data breaches, your denial of service attacks, cyber extortion, malicious software, and hacking attempts, all of that under one umbrella. And all of these are interlinked. And I'll give an example of that, is to say, well, okay, there was a link sent, came into your email server, and there's malicious software on it. Someone, unfortunately, an employee clicked on it. It freezes the system. Okay, there is now first a ransomware demand. Now, what they say, if you don't pay it, they will destroy all your data. You find out, okay, your backups are maybe up to date, maybe a week out of date. So the first thing would be to say, okay, if your backups, which is another benefit that can be claimed upon, if it is outdated, then more than likely finding out if this ransom attack is legitimate, if it's a syndicate operating, then they probably go on word of mouth. So more than likely, if the ransom is paid, they will release the data. But that's part of an investigation. So if your data is kind of up to date, and depending on the ransom demand, you would say, okay, well, the ransom demand, initially what was the trigger itself is not relevant. So then it just cascades into the data restoration to say, okay, well, fair enough. We can just restore our data. It's maybe a couple of days worth. This is what the estimated impact of the breach would be. And another example then would be is to say, okay, you found out that the ransom is a spoof. They basically just freeze and delete the data. Your backups are effectively not up to date. Then you typically would have a business interruption loss. So it's a cascading effect of potentially an extortion leading to maybe a data restoration. Finally, the safety net would be the business interruption. Now, to have someone choose any of the benefits doesn't make sense to me personally. So the next step would be, that forms part of this, is the flexibility to be inclusive instead of exclusive with respect to benefits and essential tools and services. And what I mean by that is the education, the mitigation tools, the services such as the first responder services and the insurance benefits itself all form part of one umbrella. All of them work together to mitigate the risk. And when it's needed at the end of the day, the insurance benefits are triggered. The one can't really go without the other. And for a long time, the security industry and the insurance industry have not really, they've worked against each other instead of together with each other. The next point is to have an holistic approach to underwriting instead of specific. Now, granularity is not everything in specific target markets. And what I've seen and found is, if you're a small business and you have to fill out 24 or 25 pages worth of questions that you don't even have the answers to on a risk that is critical to your business, that is a massive stumbling block or entry point to market. So simplify, just get the information that you need. make it easy for the client, but still have enough information to incept the policy. And then second to last is continuous data monitoring and analytics versus once-off scans. The once-off scan just gives you a snippet of what the customer's risk profile is. What happens after that is what is important. Everything that went before that is, yes, it could be relevant, but more than likely it is not relevant, depending on what segment of the market they fall in. And then finally is expertise versus freedom of choice, where education of the clients is what is important. Let the experts come up with the product solutions and the brokers themselves to the clients and say, this is what is needed. And as the market grows and people are educated, they will get to a point where they will have the ability to make those choices themselves. It's just the guideline. You can't force anyone to take a specific cover limit, but especially in an emerging market, is to rely on the people, rely on expertise more. And if you put all of this together, you have a simplistic product approach that is designed specifically for a target market with relevant benefits and limits, limited freedom of choice, simplistic underwriting requirements that includes proactive risk management and inclusive cyber emergency response mechanisms. Thank you. Any questions or any specific product training that is needed, or product training or additional detailed discussions? Happy to take Q&As, happy to come and individually just talk in detail. This is just a touching the surface of what is relevant and what should be relevant in cyber insurance products. Thank you.
Thank you, McLeod and Sarel. I must say that was very informative. Sarel, I especially enjoyed your sort of training approach that you took, because there's so much that we don't know, and I know we have a lot of brokers on the call. I'm sure that was very much appreciated. You are bright partners, underwriting partners. I think it's important that your contact information maybe is shared in the chat if you want to, with the brokers that are on the call. Again, thank you to Bright for being the headline sponsors today. Thank you to Global Choices for being our event partners. I took something else out of this chat. Backups, software updates, employee awareness, and cyber insurance are the 4 pillars that will help you to guide you through this difficult time, this new time of risk that we're all experiencing. I also saw a lot of chattering and comments and questions around where do you get hold of the presentations, where do you get hold of the recording of the event. At the end of this event, after the event, you will receive a thank you email from the production team at InsureTalk. In that thank you email will be a blog, and there will be a recording of this event. It will take you to YouTube. So I think it's very important that this specific session of InsureTalk is shared with your staff for awareness. Even us who work in the insurance industry, we don't know everything about cyber risk and the solutions that are out there. So please make sure that you share the information far and wide, and that we get to grips with this new emerging dominant risk that we see in the insurance landscape. So our next speaker is someone that we know really well, all of us. It's Tony, the founder of Cover Magazine. He is our media partner. Cover Magazine is our media partner at InsureTalk, and Tony is going to give us a little bit of a media update to tell us what's going on out there in the news. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Thanks everybody for giving me this time again. Thanks to InsureTalk as well. It's great to chat to you, and yeah, I'm going to be brief. The topic of my discussion is all about being brief. I think Shakespeare is one of my favorite authors, and the quote, "Brevity is the soul of wit," comes from one of his books, Hamlet, and it's sort of if you look into what that means, you'll find a huge amount of information. The same thing, one of my favorite sort of stories, so to speak, is about the American author Ernest Hemingway. And the story goes that he was sitting in the pub. He had a bit of a sort of a habit to take a few drinks. He was sitting in a pub with a couple of his friends, and he bet them that he can write a short story in 6 words. And they laughed at him, but they took the bet. He came back the next day, and his short story was simply the following: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And that was it. Now, if you think about it, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. How many people can, in their minds and in their imagination, write a story about that? It might be a personal experience, it might be a story from somebody else's experience, etc. And everybody might form their own version about that. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. It is amazing how, with so few words, 6 words, he can tell a world of environment, of history, of family, of people, etc. Similarly, there's the story of the bank robber, Willie Sutton. He's famous for saying, after he had been caught, they asked him, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. Now, for me, that is like, he didn't go into a long explanation about his reasons, etc. He simply says, well, that's where the money is. And if you think about it, I mean, that's the best answer ever. You know, it's like, that's exactly why he robs the banks. It's because that's where the money is. Shakespeare is one of the most quoted, or he is the most quoted English author. And the question is, why would that be? Why do you think he's the most quoted author? It's simply because Shakespeare also has the ability to take a big thing and turn it into a quote, to take a quote to describe a whole scene, to describe an environment, to describe a context. And he used just one single sentence usually, or a quote. Think about it, from Hamlet, to be or not to be. How many of you have used that? In how many different contexts has that been used? How that has been changed around, etc. Simple, to be or not to be. It says so much. You can expand on it incredibly well. He also had the quote, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, from a play called As You Like It. Now, if you think about that, and how you can sit probably for days and unpack that, looking at your own life, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. You can actually create so much in terms of how you plan your life, how you look at your past and your successes, your failures, etc., and look at it as your role on this world as a stage. And it's amazing, just one sentence, all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. He also, I mean, if you, very interesting sort of way of looking at marriage. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And again, looking at that sentence, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And how each one of us can actually create our own imagination around just that. Now, part of the reason why I brought this up is because if we look at today's environment and the time that we've got, which, as you know, I've got very little time here, online attention span is now just 8 seconds. Imagine that, 8 seconds. That's people's online attention span. 50% of all page views get less than 15 seconds of attention. On average, people read only 29% of the words on a page. Now, that to all of us means that any email that you write, any document that you produce, discussions that you have, meetings, sales pitches, advertising material, brochures, all of that sort of thing, you need to take into account that people's attention span is incredibly, incredibly brief. And so once you've drafted something, once you've created a document, an email, whatever, just give it another read or two and look at how many words you actually have put in that are superfluous, that you don't have to use, words that are unnecessary, sentences that you can cut out. How can you say this to get to the point rather than be too elaborate? Now, what we've done at Cover in response, just in closing, is we've actually redesigned our website. We've rebuilt it. We're busy sort of slowly but surely launching it and opening up different areas of the website, etc. But the whole aim of our rebuild of our website is to go for brevity. We're going to be able to provide you what you want in the format that you want, in the way we are going to break everything down. In other words, an article that might be 800 words will become quoted in 5 points. An article or a podcast, article will usually have a podcast link to it that is 6 minutes long. A 6-minute podcast will have a single quote that comes out of it, or 2 quotes that come out of it. Those quotes will either be in writing or they will be in an audiogram. So everything that we've done on our website is to try and reach the audience, our audience, which is partly you as well, the audience here, is to actually get the point across, because not everything has to be looked at in depth. It simply has to stimulate a thought in somebody's mind, and then you need a way for them to get hold of you or to engage with you. And that's the whole aim of what we're trying to do with our new website. So I'll leave you with that thought. Brevity is the soul of wit, and take your time, but also try and make sure that you give people just what they want, when they want it, where they want it, and in exactly the format that they would like it. So I leave you with that, my piece of brevity. Last but not least, I just want to say our broker survey closes tomorrow. If any of the brokers on here haven't yet provided your input, please do so. We will be sharing that information with you once we're done. Thank you very much and enjoy your afternoon. Over to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Tony. And on that brief note, we have reached the last session of our event. Our event partners is Global Choices, Wimpy and his team at Global Choices. And I just want to do a quick little bit of an overview of what Global Choices do and who they are. They create and maintain partnerships by adding to everyday life with their innovative digital solutions. And we're going to hear from an individual, from a lady called Nikki Bush now. She's our keynote speaker for the day. She's going to address us for about half an hour. And then after that, in conversation with Wimpy from Global Choices. But I have to introduce Nikki to you because I'm very excited to hear what she has to say. She's a human potential expert. And she's an award-winning speaker, and with no less than 5 best-selling books. She's an author as well. Her insights and practical frameworks shift perspective, inspiring choice and action. In 2019, Nikki was inducted as a Hall of Fame speaker, so you can imagine I am looking forward to this speech. It's a Lifetime Achievement Award and the first South African woman to receive this honor. That is pretty damn amazing. So wonderful, wonderful accolade there. In the same year, she was recognized by the Ford Motor Company as a woman with drive. Nikki is a go-to person for the media. She's done more than 3,500 media interviews. That is something to be quite, that's something to be quite proud of. And she does weekly slots on radio and TV. Whether you are wanting to level up when it comes to people, positioning, or promise, Nikki Bush has the answers. And on that point, over to you, Nikki.
Thank you so much for that really warm introduction, and good afternoon to everybody who is here today. I'm not sure if you heard that. Good afternoon to everyone who's here today, and thank you very much for that really warm introduction. It's great to be with InsureTalk. So 2017 was supposed to be a year of celebration. It was my mum's 50th, my 50th birthday, my mum's 70th birthday, my dad's 80th birthday, and my son was going to be finishing matric. But it turned into a year of murder, of betrayal, and decisions no mother should ever have to make, and scenes no child should ever have to witness. My story that I'm going to share with you is not a nice one, but it validates what you in the insurance industry do, and it will provide you with a why, because you matter. I am a symbol of every client that you will ever have, and I'm going to reveal your service to humanity through my story, and I hope that you get to see how you can be a hero and make the world a better place. Some of the biggest, most defining moments of our lives come with little fanfare or warning. Change happens through choice, through chance, or through crisis or calamity, and you are no strangers to that. Sometimes we are sent life tremors, warnings, and sometimes we are sent life quakes. And those life quakes have the potential to bury us as victims or to break us open and plant us like a seed. And so on the 18th of November 2017, my family and I were victims of one of those life quakes when we were victims of a home invasion in Johannesburg, South Africa. At 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 intruders entered our home, and time was divided into 2 parts, before this and after this, and nothing would ever be the same again. And so my husband took a single shot to the heart. He was murdered. He didn't die. He was murdered. We had been together for 28 years. We'd been married for 26 years. We had 2 beautiful sons, and we'd lived in the same house for 23 years. We were Mr. and Mrs. Consistency. This was 5 years ago. It was sudden. It was brutal. It took my breath away. I'm not going to share any more of that story, but I do want to share some of the wisdom and the lessons from the widow on the other side of trauma, because there is so much that you can learn as members of the insurance industry, because you need to have empathy for clients. Any kind of loss they experience, whether it is a cell phone, whether it is a house, whether it is a vehicle, whether it is a life or a dread disease diagnosis, it is all loss, it is all change. And with that, you get to partner with them on this journey. As I said, I'm a symbol of every client you will ever have, because I have claimed on so many of the policies that you sell. So life can be fleeting. And of course, 1,000 moments I took for granted, mostly because I assumed there would be 1,000 more. And so I want to share with you what trauma and loss looks like from inside the jar, so that you can be more empathetic with your clients. So how did it feel when a rolling ball came and knocked down my skittle? This was not part of my life plan. It was definitely not part of my life plan. And I want to share with you 3 things. What happened to my brain? What happened to my body? And what happened to my finances? Because these are all things that you need to be cognizant of if you are dealing with clients. And this is important whether you are client facing or whether you are behind the scenes, making sure that those claims get processed speedily and efficiently, and of course, with empathy. So the first thing I want to talk about is my brain, because your clients who are victims of some loss or another are impacted by this trauma, whatever their trauma happens to be. And if any of you have experienced trauma, and seeing as we've got about 3,000 people here today, there is a large percentage of you who have experienced your own personal traumas, whether it was during COVID or any other time. And maybe you can actually find yourselves in what I am talking about this afternoon. So my brain, what was going on in my head as a result of deep shock and trauma? Well, I instantly got ADD, attention deficit disorder. I couldn't concentrate for longer than a couple of seconds. And you're looking here at a high-performing person who has never had a concentration problem in her life. So ADD. The next thing was that my RAM, my processing power in my brain was so low. It was down to about 20%. And normally I'm at a full 100% all the time. So now try and imagine this. I am a new widow. I have become a single mom overnight, and I am the sole breadwinner all of a sudden, and I can't concentrate. I have low processing power. I did take 2 months off, but I had to go back to work. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a self-employed speaker. But this plays havoc with your ability to operate in the world. And so some of the things that happen when you feel out of control, as you can imagine, I felt extremely out of control, is that you try and control what you can control, which was very little in that first 6 to 12 months after becoming a widow. And so I started becoming OCD, obsessive compulsive. And the thing I could control was my handbag. And you would find me packing and unpacking and repacking my handbag. And the one thing I was obsessed with was whether or not we had enough toilet paper in our house. So I'm not sure if this resonates for any of you. I started experiencing panic attacks. I really battled with making choices and decisions. Now, I will go back to this point just now. Remember what I've just said here, because you are going to be asking your clients for information. You're going to be asking your clients to make choices and decisions when their brain is on a go slow. I experienced sleeplessness. And so at 3 o'clock most mornings, because that's what time this trauma happened to us, I would sit bolt upright and not be able to go back to sleep again. I was the person who swore I would never take antidepressants or sleeping tablets in my lifetime. Well, I landed up taking both for at least, 24 months. I'm still on the antidepressants. It is quite hard to get off them afterwards. And then there was huge memory loss. And as you can imagine, when you're trying to work, if you have short-term memory loss, it was the short-term memory that was the problem. Trying to remember what somebody had just said to me was really hard. Now, bear that in mind if you're a financial advisor or a broker who is at the coalface with a client having to make a claim. I could be thinking about what conversation I'd had over a cup of coffee with a friend, and I could remember who I had it with, but not what was discussed. Or I could remember the topic, but not whom I had it with. I mean, that's how bad it was. When I was giving presentations as a speaker, I used to tell my audiences for the first year, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the middle of talking to you, I might suddenly hit a blank. So best you guys listen carefully, because if I get lost in my presentation, I am going to ask you where I am. So I had to find ways to shore myself up. And the memory loss was just like, it was like cotton wool in my head. Going back to the ADD, I had to get friends and family to come and sit with me if I knew I had important chores to get done, like answering a lot of emails, etc. Otherwise, I would never finish anything. So the next thing I want to talk about is what happened to my body, because trauma takes no prisoners. It's in every cell, in your brain, in your heart, in your body, and you can't just ignore it. So my body, this was an interesting one. I am slim. I've always been on the slim side of slim, and people thought I was going to get anorexia due to shock. And I've never been anorexic, never thought of being anorexic, but honest to God, at the age of 50, I was 54 kilos. And I had just had some magnificent cigar dresses made for a big road show that I'd done for the financial services industry that ended 2 weeks before my husband's death. I put 12 kilos on in that first year. I have since lost 6 kilos. I still don't fit the dresses that I had made for that road show. Due to shock, I went into perimenopause about 3 years earlier than I should have. Not only did I not know the day of the week or my name on certain days, but now I didn't know what my hormones were doing either. I did shallow breathing for well over 12 months. I literally did shallow breathing because my diaphragm was so stuck with shock. I had a stomach ache often. Now, I thought that stomach ache meant I needed to vomit. But what I discovered over time was, as that stomach ache built up, if I ran to the loo to vomit, I would be dry retching over the bowl, and the next thing I would be weeping. And it was just tears that were storing up and backing up, and I needed to cry. So crying was an absolute gift, a real gift. And I was not the person who knew where her cry button was until my husband died. I was not the person who cried in every movie, whether it was soppy or sad or anything. But boy, for 2.5 years, I don't know where all that water came from. It literally poured out of me. There were times when I felt I was crying out of my hands, my feet, my stomach, not just my eyes, my head, my ears. Where does all that water come from? And then, of course, with the shock, I developed a tremor in my hands. And that tremor lasted for 12 months. My handwriting just was dreadful. And that's because what happens with deep trauma and shock is that the body and the brain are so clever. They bring all your energy into the center for survival. And it leaves very little energy in your extremities, your hands, your feet, your legs, your arms. And here I was, a 50-year-old, athletic, fit, falling upstairs, falling downstairs, falling over my own feet. Now, I want you to think about your older clients, especially older clients who've been married forever. When one of them dies, how often does the other one fall within the first 4 to 6 months and break an ankle, a hip, or a wrist? It is so common. So here's a piece of advice. If you have clients who have gone through major loss and shock, please advise them to walk and move just a little bit slower, just a little bit. And then I had this metallic taste in my mouth. And that metallic taste lasted for a full year. It didn't matter what I drank or what I ate. I could not get rid of it. So it was most frustrating because it was a horrible taste. Now I want to talk to you about my finances. As I said, I became the sole breadwinner and the single mum overnight. We had a small insurance policy, personal insurance policy on both of us. We'd gone through a couple of tough years financially, and so we had pulled back on our premiums. And I was very fortunate, though, that we did have an insurance policy. Although it didn't leave me as a filthy rich widow, it gave me enough to have breathing space for that first year while I found my feet again. And, you know, we had critically looked at what size insurance policy we needed and could afford. And we both figured that we were both still able to earn an income. So it didn't have to be that big. But I had to go back to work. I had to go and earn the money to feed the children. And I want to talk to you about the fact that my financial advisor came to see me about 36 hours after my husband's death to give me the high level of where I found myself. Now, I was extremely grateful that we had already had 4 or 5 years of a relationship with him, because when shit goes down, quite frankly, you really need somebody in your corner. So he came to see me about 36 hours after my husband's death and explained to me where I found myself. And he left with these 4 words. He said, "And so it begins." And I will never forget those 4 words, "and so it begins." And what he was alluding to was, and so it begins the wrapping up of a life, the wrapping up of a life. And something in my head went, it'll be okay, because 4 years before my husband's death, he developed an arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat. And so when that happened, I thought I need to create what I called a what if file, because what if my husband died of a heart attack? So at that time, 4 years before my husband's death, so this is now 9 years ago, I put together my what if file. I put our wills in there. I put our bank accounts, our insurance policies, our life insurance, our passport copies, ID, birth certificates, marriage certificates, you name it, anything I could think of that we would need, I put in that file. So when my financial advisor said, and so it begins, I thought, I'll be okay. I mean, I've known many people who've wrapped up husbands' lives and wives' lives who've died of cancer, and they've said what a bureaucratic nightmare it is and what a terrible experience it has been. But for me, I went, I'm going to be okay. I've got this handled. Until it got to the nitty-gritties, and I realized that what was in my what if file was sorely lacking. And so I have asked the tech team to put into the chat the link to give you access to a copy of my what if file checklist. If they could please do so now, that would be great. Because I want to give you the gift of my what if file checklist. This is normally available for purchase on my website, so take advantage of it. This is through my personal experience of the things I didn't have. Obviously, I had probably about 60% of them, but I didn't have some critical things. Now, I'm one of those dot the I's, cross the T's kinds of people, and I always carried my utility bill for FICA and all of those things, the latest one in my handbag. It was never out of date until my husband's death. Now, interestingly, all those utility bills were in my name, but they went through to his email and he paid them from our common account. That was a critical tripping up factor for me, was because that electricity bill was 3 days out of date. I had no proof of anything. So these are the kinds of things that you need to remind your clients about, is to have an updated utility bill. If you're married and there are passwords, what my husband didn't do was he didn't provide me with a list of passwords. Do you think I could get into City of Johannesburg for water bills, to Eskom for electricity, etc.? We found passwords and none of them worked. Do you think I was angry with my husband? Absolutely. I was angry about the way he died, and I was angry at the fact that he had not prepared for his death. So please love yourselves and each other enough to download my what if file checklist. Don't just download it. Please go and create your what if file in a real file or on your computer and make sure somebody has access to it. Where are you storing your passwords? Things like birth certificates. If you are going to be claiming for your children and there's any pension fund money, then you are going to need vault copy birth certificates. Well, I didn't even know what a vault copy birth certificate is, and probably most of you don't either. You've got the abridged and the unabridged versions, but you don't have a vault copy birth certificate that looks almost identical, but no payments will be made out without that. I couldn't get a pension payout without an unabridged marriage certificate. We all have that little abridged one from the day we got married, but I wonder how many of you actually have an unabridged marriage certificate. So those are just a couple of tiny things that I'm sharing with you that tripped me up. And wrapping up somebody's life really boils down to the paper, the policies, and the money. Once the body is gone, it's about the paper, the policies, and the money. Thank you for all your beautiful messages, by the way. And I do need to tell you that I am 5 years down the track. So I'm not standing here as a grieving widow today, but I've had a hectic 5 years, a very, very hectic 5 years, because my boys and I, and they are now 23, 27, and I'm now 55, have had 3 versions of grief, 3 versions of trauma, completely different versions. We have grieved in completely different ways. And one of my children has had post-traumatic stress disorder and only started dealing with his trauma in year 4. And let me tell you, when trauma is not dealt with and you sweep it under the rug, it comes out in ever more destructive ways. Now, we've all had access because we have private healthcare, etc., and we can afford it, to a lot of support. I could not be standing up here today and sharing this kind of content if I hadn't had lots of support in terms of coaches, counselors, therapists, doctors, etc., to be here. It costs a lot of money to get well. But back to the what if file checklist. I want to share with you before we close off. I want to share with you my timeline of what happened in wrapping up my husband's estate in that first year after his death, because it deals with a concept called liquidity. And I spend a lot of time these days talking particularly to women about liquidity, that they need to know what their high level position is like, because that means they will know how much money they've got for what period of time before they have to be raking in cash again themselves. So let me share that timeline for you. And by the way, just click on that link in the chat that's been shared. You'll register there and we will email you the resources. There's more than just the what if file checklist. There's a few other things, but you will get the what if file checklist. So let me give you the timeline. My financial advisor comes to visit 36 hours after my husband's death. The personal life insurance paid out within 2 weeks. So that is a brilliant, brilliant policy. It is quick. Then the funeral policy paid out 6 weeks after death. I know some pay out sooner than others, but mine was 6 weeks, which meant I had to fund my husband's funeral, and 1,000 people pitched at my husband's funeral, and we held a wake for 100 people afterwards. There was a coffin. We chose the cheapest coffin possible, just a pine coffin. My husband, by the way, just on a point of humor, was 6'6". He was very tall. And when we had to go and choose a coffin, you go online and it says small, medium, and large. And he always took XXL clothes. And we had to phone the funeral parlor and say, would he fit in a large coffin, which they duly told me he would. It's interesting when you're going through masses of shock, there's also great place for humor. So the short-term insurance claims, because we'd had a home invasion, obviously there was blood spatter, there was linen that had to be replaced, there were carpets and curtains that had to be replaced, the house needed a deep clean, there were all the things that were stolen in the process that needed to be replaced. That short-term claim took ages, largely because I had to go and get quotes for every single item. And there were lots of smalls in computer bags and things like that that needed replacing. It was an arduous task. And then there was a medical aid extender policy that came with group risk cover. And that was a total surprise to me. I didn't know that I was going to get 7 years of medical aid cover. And that was one of those little shining lights, I have to say. And then we had gap cover, which was a real perler of a policy. And I didn't realize that you could actually claim for accidental death, and you could claim for all those trauma counseling sessions that, you know, once you've run out of the 6 that medical aid gives you, you can then claim on your gap cover. There was also the pension that took 11 months to pay out. So look at the length of time I had to fund myself with only the life insurance policy really behind me. Then there was an education extender policy as part of group risk cover, and that took a whole year to kick in. So I had to fund my son's first year of university with no help from the insurance policy. Group risk policies seem to be the most difficult to administer. I often say to a lot of my clients, even if you've got an education extender policy as part of group risk, go and get yourself a private one, because it, like private life insurance, pays straight away. And as I said, the pension took 11 months to pay out, and that pension would not pay out until I had police clearance that I was no longer a suspect in my husband's murder. And then the saddest thing, on top of my husband's murder was the fact that my youngest son, who was held at gunpoint, he was writing final matric exams. My eldest son was out partying at 3 o'clock in the morning, as one does. My youngest son could never come and sleep in our home again. And so we had to sell our home of 23 years. And that was a massive mindset shift. And it really does tug at your heartstrings when you don't know who you are anymore and you don't live in a place that is familiar. And I really have to say, we felt like refugees in our own lives. So I want to read you a poem. I wrote about 250 poems about 2 years ago around trauma, loss, grief, parenting, and love. They just poured out of me over about a 6-week period. And this was one I wrote around wrapping up an estate and my experience with the financial services industry. And I got a number of people to read it who had also had to wrap up estates of close family members. And they all just said, Nikki, this is just so real. So I share it with you. And it's not that every part of my journey was terrible, but a lot of it was very difficult. So this is how it goes. And so it begins, the wrapping up of a life, the paper, the policies, the money, the memories. Enter service providers, lawyers, financial institutions lacking in empathy, non-existent customer service, making you feel invisible. A number, not a person. Your head is spinning, your heart is bruised and battered. And now the system gets to beat you up too, rubbing salt into your wounds, hurting you some more. So I want that to land with you because it really is true of so much of the journey. You know, companies are happy to sell you policies, but not so quick to pay you out. And some of the sticking points I know because I work closely with many clients in the insurance industry. It's a slow process. There's a lot of documentation required. And of course, you run the risk of fraud. So your risk book, you have to be really, really aware of the risk that you're carrying. Because I know people do strange things to get payouts. So I just always felt I was being questioned as to whether I was telling the truth or not. Were these my children? Were these my husband's children? Was I his only wife? Was I a murder suspect? You name it. Anyway, through the bureaucratic nightmare, I learned to lose my temper, and I'm actually a really nice girl. I learned to use the F word really loudly so that my neighbors 2 doors down could hear me. I learned to cry in frustration. I learned to lie. Somebody else committed fraud on my behalf so that we had a utility bill that worked. Then we could actually carry on with what we needed to. I really pissed people off sometimes. I pulled rank. I used my contacts. I don't know how an uneducated woman in South Africa manages to wrap up an estate, because I couldn't have done it if I wasn't part of the media, if I couldn't threaten to go to the press because I was part of the media. And I learned to drink a bit of whiskey too. So that is the reality of what it feels like when you phone call centers and you say, I have an extended warranty on my vehicle. It's in my husband's name. It's for my vehicle. He has died. What do I do to make sure I can maintain cover on my vehicle? And the call center operator doesn't have a script for death. And you get told, sorry, Mrs. Bush, but we can only deal with this if we speak to the policyholder. And I would go, and what do you really want me to do? Well, we just really need to speak to Mr. Bush. Did you not hear me? My husband is dead. Do you want a direct line to heaven? What is it you would like? And so I do a lot of work in the insurance industry. I'm happy to come and speak to your staff, to your call centers, because we really need to up the empathy levels in our customer service in this industry, because it's a big thing. It's a huge thing to deal with somebody who's got cotton wool in their head, whose life is falling apart, and nothing is working anymore. And you are part of this journey. You sell products for peace of mind. You trade in peace of mind. And this is a priceless commodity. A commodity for when a what-if moment strikes, no matter how big or small that moment is. And my question to you before we go to Wimpy to have a conversation is, do you have a script for death and trauma? do you? Over to you, Vimpy.
Thank you very much, Nikki. And that was really heartfelt. I'm actually sitting with a little bit of a broken my throat because of your story, and it really touched my heart. And it actually just shows us how important is the role that we all play in the insurance industry, and our noble purpose, and how important that noble purpose is. But it is also about the customer experience and how important that customer experience is. So your question about the script, I think we, especially the call center, one touch and that empathetic experience. Under how we approach, because we do deal with quite a lot of funeral policies and customer phoning in for their assistance services around a death, is that we don't have a script. We have empathy. And the empathy and the culture of empathy is a very important part of creating that customer experience and that customer experience script. And it's about the right people, the empathetic people that can actually be essential, and because they are aware of people's feelings and the ability, because that's what empathy is about, to apply that awareness and strength and to connect with that individual. As you mentioned, if you just follow a script, you'd actually lose that human touch. And human touch is very, very important in everything we do. We in the stage of technology advancement, but we mustn't forget that when we innovate for humans, and we must actually use technology to enable empathetic customer experience. And that's where, especially in the insurance industry, it's quite well known for its siloed effect, because you can speak with one insurance company, but your 3 different policies are from 3 different departments. There's not a single customer file, especially the old legacy systems. Like you and I in this age, we become that pre-paper age actually when we were born. We evolved over time and became part of technology. But it is very, very important that empathetic employees, they become intuitive. They actually start acting and guiding the client, because as you said, your emotional process that you were going through is also quite a chemical process. You're going to fight the flight, and that's very stressful. And this how you and so what we try to teach and also manage and is to create a culture of empathy, but also the experience to activate sympathetic and support, and how we can resolve it on behalf, because we become that placeholder for that person at that moment and to help with their experience. But you must always think a little bit bigger. What is all the other touch points that will be? That's where innovation and evolution of products evolve from.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, Vimpy, that you talk about innovation and the evolution of products, and yet we need to go back to basics, to the human experience, and the kinds of things you need to say when you come across a client, who's had a what if moment, as I call them, is actually, I'm sorry. As simple as I'm sorry, or how are you doing today if you're involved in processing something? Actually be aware that every day on this journey that they're on might be different for them. And then that critical, magical question of, what can I do to help? Because that is your role. What can I do to help? Yeah. And then a nice other comment is, I'm on this, or I will sort it out. That's what they want, is that person who's running alongside them, who's going to help them get the job done. But very importantly, Vimpy, is to please follow through and do what you promise. That is so important, because this is what happens in real life. You sit at book club after you have gone through a loss, whether it is a burglary or a death or whatever it is, or you go to cycle with your mates to the cradle, or you are playing golf and somebody says to you, what's been the worst experience in wrapping up your husband's estate? And believe you me, there are stories. And then they also ask, what have been the good news stories? And you want to be a good news story. You don't want to be the bad news story. You want to be the good book club story, the good cycling club story. Because word of mouth is how you actually get more referrals than anything else. But remember what I said right early on in the presentation, that my brain, my RAM was low. It was on a go slow. So when my estate attorney, for example, or my financial advisor came to speak to me, they would be on minute 20. And I remember this distinctly with the estate attorney. She was rattling off all sorts of things about the will and what had to happen. And when she was on minute 20, I said, can you just stop? Because I am still stuck on minute 5. Because you guys speak legalese, and you speak in financial terminology that is not my first language. Remember, this is your comfort zone. It is not my comfort zone. And so I found I had to slow people down and say, can you just speak a little more slowly? And then the other thing that you can say to your clients who are going through trauma is bring somebody with you to the meeting. Because I can tell you, with short-term memory loss, I didn't remember half of what was said in a meeting. So I had to have an outside brain come with me who could remember the things that I couldn't. And check in with your client that they're actually understanding you. Don't treat them as a blonde bimbo, but please just check in. Are you with me? Do I need to explain something? Do it respectfully. And empower them. Don't treat them as victims. And validate that the cover they have, whether it's a lot or a little, is due to good choices that they've made, and then commit to taking the journey with them to find the resolution.
Thank you very much. So my personal philosophy is that I believe, because as you, I also had these experiences in my past. So I believe empathy is one of the most unappreciated ability in business. And one big problem with corporate and innovation, as I mentioned earlier, everything become increasingly data-led and rather than human-led. And we stop caring. And as that word, we stop caring, Christopher mentioned in his first, the duty of care in law. But we as businesses, individuals, have a duty of care. And this is about the experiences you put your customers through, and also in life about empathy. So that's my story. Thank you.
Wimpy and Nikki, on that very sobering note, we wrap up today's session. Nikki, I want to thank you for being prepared to share your trauma with us through your story, to remind us that as an industry, we have to do better. I know I speak from personal experience from the other side of the table. We talk about claims. We don't talk about people who have suffered immense trauma in this country of ours that have too many incidents and stories like the one that you shared with us today. So I think it's evident from the chats that you made a huge impact. We appreciate you doing that. And as I said, sharing your story today. So thank you so much. And Wimpy, Global Choices, thank you for partnering with us today as the event partner. And again, to Bright South Africa, we appreciate your sponsorship. On that note, it's over and out from the InsureTalk team. Please join us next month, end of November. The registration link will be posted in the chats as well. And yes, as we wrap up our time towards the end of the year. Thank you very much, everyone.